Hey everybody, I am bringing you a new video today where I'm going to show you how I take old dated planners and turn them into my plotting notebooks. This has been something that's been really fun for me because I had a couple of old planners that I had paid for and never used because I buy way too many planners every year, and sometimes things work out and sometimes they don't, or I had a few planners that I only half used. So out of necessity, I started thinking, how can I use these instead of just throwing them away? Because they have dates on them for previous years, so it doesn't really fit, that you can use them moving forward unless you redated the entire calendar. So I started thinking about how I could use these for plotting notebooks. So I'm going to show you that today. I have both an Erin Condren hardbound planner that is a 2017-2018 18-month planner, and I actually have really wanted to try the Erin Condren. Most of the time they're coil bound, but they released a hardbound and I was really interested in them, but they were like $30. So I waited until my local Staples had the 2017-2018 dated planners on sale for only $10, and I snagged one so that I could practice this plotting method inside here. So I'll show you that at the end. But the main notebook that I use on a regular basis is this Happy Planner. It's in a deluxe. This is the big Happy Planner, not the classic, but you could probably use a classic as well. And the big Happy Planner is more like a regular sized notebook, 8.5 by 11. And then I've got the deluxe cover that has the Happy Planner inside. And I also have a Happy Planner hole punch that will punch the holes for this, and it will also do a big or a classic. And you can get these like at Michael's, probably at Amazon, lots of different places. If you're not familiar with what a Happy Planner is a disc bound system. So you have these discs, they're plastic and metal discs that you get, and then the pages inside have these little notches when you punch them, if you can see that, where they just clip on. So instead of a binder that you have to actually pull apart the binder, you can just stick the pages straight inside. So I enjoy using this instead of other types of planners because you can really create your own notebooks out of these old planners and just use the dated pages however you want. So inside my deluxe cover, I have a pin pouch, a few stickers. Usually I'll have one of these Happy Planner sticker books just placed into one of the pockets so that I can carry that with me. And then I'll have various stickers. I'll show you how I use these in a little bit. So I'm going to set those to the side as well. And when I get ready to plot, I usually pull this planning pouch, this little pouch out, because it tends to get in the way when you open it. It gets a little bumpy. Inside this pouch, I will usually have some like Tombow removable adhesive that you can put on, and I'll show you how I use all these things in a little bit. Then I have coordinating washi tapes that I want to use, and then some pens that I can use while I'm planning. Most of my pens I use for color coding. So I've got these sepia pens that I really like because you can get them in different colors, and I'm just a sucker for felt tip pens, and you can see how these particular felt tip pens have really nice long tips to them. And they're very inexpensive. These are probably my favorite ones to use. So actually, I'm going to use these Sharpie pens because it has a pink. I don't know where I put my pink of the sepia markers, so we'll set those to the side. But I keep, these basic tools, and usually I have a set of scissors in here as well. Now this is actually quite heavy, so I don't carry it out with me like if I'm going writing to Starbucks. What I'll use instead is a portable plot notes booklet, and I actually made a video on how I make those plot note booklets, so I will link that down below for you as well. So what I did was I found this big Happy Planner on clearance long after. This was another 18-month planner, I believe, or it could have been a planner from last year. And I found it on clearance like toward the end of the year for only like $7. So this was really, really inexpensive. And I took the tabs and just put my book title on the tabs. I probably could have done a prettier job, but I just did a basic job, so that the dividers now have my different book covers. And I don't want to show you like my actual plotting notes because, you know, I have fans that watch this channel and I don't want them to see the notes that I have made. So what I'm going to do is just make something for a future book, and I'm not going to fill it out with my own plot notes. I'll just show you how I do it. So on the back of the tab or the divider, there is the month. Like this was from April. So instead of using the month, I have these, I have various types of printables, but this is just my own paper that I made lined paper for. And I'm going to take this lined paper, I'm going to stick it in here, and then I'm going to attach it with my adhesive. And that way I can use this page to cover this one. Okay, so now instead of seeing the dated page that has gone by, now I've got just a note page. So on this page, I usually will write things like my character names or any kind of story threads that I want to carry through, or just any kind of notes. Then what I also have here is I printed out, I got this from a seller on Etsy. I'm not sure if that's going to show up here or not, but this is just a really light pink dot grid, and I can print it out 8.5 by 11. So this is perfect. And I use an HP paper that I will link down below too, that is nice and thick and it doesn't bleed through. So I grabbed 2 of those sheets. I always kind of have a pile of them ready to go because I also want to cover the other side of my dated sheets. So this is just 2. I have like a stack of my dated sheets from old planners just sitting, you know, down in an old, this actually may be something part of 2018, but I have them sitting in a drawer down here, and I just pulled out 2 random pages. They don't even have to really match, but I kind of like the flowers on this. So what I will do is I'm going to take these first 2 pages and I'm going to stick them into the planner, and then I'm just going to repeat that process to cover up the other side. Okay, so now what I have so far is I have the divider with a note page on the back. I have my pink dot grid, which is now attached to my planning page. Then I also have the back side is covered. So I can use all of these for notes now instead of having that opposite side of the planner page. I can use those for notes. Then the only other things that I usually will put in here are, I have these character plotting pages that I have made myself from James Scott Bell's Superstructure. I've actually also been using another plotting method that I have some other sheets for, but for now this will work because I already had them printed out. I will grab 1 set of these sheets for each character in my book. So this is a romance, so there are 2 characters, male and female. So I grabbed 2 sets of sheets. So this has all of, you know, the points, basic plot points of Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And then on this other sheet, I have the goal, motivation, conflict for each character, their external and internal. And then I have their character arc triangle, where they are in the beginning of the story, the middle or mirror moment of the story, and where they are at the end. So these 2 sheets are really kind of where I start my plotting, and I like to have them, you know, printed out, and I keep them for each book and each point of view character so that I can really start overall brainstorming. This doesn't give me every single scene of the book, but it tells me enough about what the characters want, what their goals are, what they need to discover throughout the story. It tells me enough about where they are at the beginning and where they're going in terms of the character arc. And it gives me these main plot points, like the doorway of no return number 1. That gives me that first kind of twist, or that first moment of no return. Then, you know, the mirror moment gives me that midpoint, like where is this character going? It gives me that midpoint twist. Doorway of no return number 2 is what leads us into Act 3. The lights out or black moment goes here. The final battle transformation. It just gives me that overarching view of how the plot of this story is going to go. And I usually will also, and you can see this in some of my other things, I usually will also have a lot of just brainstorming pages. So I'll just print out just basic notebook paper. Basically, I have them in different colors because I pretty much am a crazy color coding fiend, but I will also add those sheets so that I can keep all my plot notes in here at once. But the main thing is, how do we use these dated pages? So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I do with this. So the first thing we need to do is cover up the places where there are dates listed. So up here at the top, what I would normally do is I'm going to just pick out a washi that color codes or color coordinates with anything that might happen to be on the planner pages. A lot of the Happy Planner pages will have something already done. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this up. Now you could use something, this is kind of see-through. You could use something completely opaque if you wanted to, but I'm going to just use this and I'll show you what I do as I go. Okay, so what I've done so far is just use some basic washi tape to cover up the dates here. And I've also separated this final box. If you see how this Happy Planner, also the Erin Condren, is the same way, that they have these 3 boxes. So I'm going to use that in my plotting, but I'm going to separate the bottom box. Then what I'm going to do is I take these round Avery labels and I cover up the rest of the date. Okay, now that I have my labels in place, what I will do is I'm going to use each of these section of blocks for a different part of the plot. Now this is where you can totally customize it depending on what plotting method you use. For me, I use the 3-act structure, but in my mind, Act 1 is, relatively short. Then you've got Act 2 is almost like 2 acts in and of itself, so I separate that. Then you've got Act 3 here at the end, which doesn't for me take necessarily a lot of listing out scenes because it's not as much buildup. It's usually just, okay, this is the final battle. So it doesn't need as much space. So you'll see what I do here is I'm going to label these so that Act 1 is both of these first sections. So this will be Act 1 Part A and Act 1 Part B. Okay, so then I hope I can explain this without it being too confusing, but then Act 2 actually takes up twice as much space, and I separate it here with the midpoint or mirror moment being right here. So I'm going to use 2 columns for Act 1, 2 columns for Act 2 Part 1, and 2 columns for Act 2 Part 2. So the way I label them is I will say Act 2, and then I'll put 1A. So this is like Part 1A, then Act 2, and this will be 1B. So I've got Act 2, 1A, Act 2, 1B. So this is the first half of Act 2, separated by the midpoint down here. Then this is the second half of Act 2, so I've got 2A and 2B. Then this final column is going to be all I need of Act 3. So I will just put Act 3, and then I'll have my A and Act 3 down here with my B. Because there are 7 days in the week for this weekly spread, this was just the best way that I could think of to separate these where it would make sense and have room for all the plotting notes that I need. So in terms of plot for me, this would be the first half of Act 1, and there's usually going to be some kind of little twist here at the end of this first section. Then at the end of Act 1, you've got the doorway of no return, which would be right here. Then I've got Act 2, first half, with the midpoint or the mirror moment here, which is that kind of game-changing moment. Then in Act 2, this is kind of like the reaction to everything, the reaction to the midpoint and that game changer, and coming up with that final plan and everything that's leading you toward that ultimate final battle. So this little section here will be whatever that second doorway is. And then Act 3, this is all of your like storming the castle, final battles type movements. And then this little section down here is what I have for after the black moment and the final conflict. This is the resolution. So I just usually need to write, oh, they go home and, you know, they all make up, or they've declared their love and now this is their like little epilogue. So it doesn't really need as much space as the actual scenes or rising action of Act 2. And hopefully that makes sense. Of course, you could take this and you could separate it however you wanted to do. Now, down here below where I've separated these boxes at the bottom, this is where I will write notes, and I will keep scene notes down here that correspond to the boxes that go above it. So if I'm talking about like the intro of the characters or the introduction of this story or the beginning of the world building, I might leave some notes down here about something I want to remember. This, if this is like the next book in a series, it might be something that, you know, that I need to touch on here in the first act that I don't want to forget about. Or if it's a brand new book, like this Witch's Mark is the next book in my Triton or my Willow Harbor series. So this is a standalone romance. So here I might leave some more notes about, you know, how the characters look or what type of situation or conflict they're coming from. I might just make some notes about what I want to remember about those characters. It just sort of depends on what fits the story, what kind of notes need to go down here. Now, also, I want to cover up over here this place where it says February because I don't need that. So what I usually do is I'll go into one of these Me and My Big Ideas books and I will find something that I can cover it with. So for example, that covers it quite nicely. Then you could also use just some washi tape if you wanted to cover it with washi tape. I don't see anything just jumping out at me from that sticker book. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to put this here in the middle and I will just write my title on there. Really, it's anything you could use to cover that up and make it pretty. You know, I could maybe put pink or something there to make it nicer. Then down below on this side column is usually where I'll put notes about like my POV characters. So I'll just list the main characters, any other kind of story threads I want to carry through. I'll also usually put my word count goal. So for example, in this book, my word count goal is 50,000 words. Then what I will do is, just as a little note underneath here, I will put what milestone I want to hit in terms of those word count goals by the time I get to that particular word count. So for this particular book, all I do is I usually separate it by 4. So for example, this is a 50,000 word book. So I know that by the midpoint, I want to be at about 25,000 words. So I'll just set that right underneath here. And then I just continue to go from there. So I'm going to put 50,000 down here at the end, which is where I want to be by the time I finish the story. But that would also mean I want to be here by the end of Act 2. I would want to be at 37,500 here. And then where I hit the doorway, first doorway of no return, I would want to be at 12,500. That just sort of gives me a roadmap so that as I'm writing, I can be like, okay, I've way overestimated this. The book's going to be much longer. These are just kind of guidelines that I follow, and I like to write those underneath the main turning points at the end of each act so that I can stay on track. Then usually what I'll do is just keep any other little notes down here. So that is basically how I do my plotting. I will also usually, like I said, use some sort of color coding system. Sometimes I will use dots like these dots that I got off of Amazon, and I will, you know, put a pink dot for one, you know, like my pink dot would be for my female character, and I might use a blue dot for my male character. Sometimes I will use those stickers, and each dot will equal, you know, the different scenes. I'll just write out the different scenes that you find in this particular book. Now, since I've got about 12,000 words per act, for me, that means there's going to be about six or seven major scenes that happen in this first act. So it would usually be, you know, somewhere around 2 in each box. And what I would usually do is I would use a pink pen to make a dot and, you know, write in what that character's doing. So it might be like, if the opening scene is, so my female character in this book is named Anna. So in this, I might put just a little pink dot here, and I would write out something about like Anna shows up at the coffee shop and meets this other mysterious guy. So I might just write a little bit of note about that. Again, it gets difficult to kind of show exactly that process without giving away what some of the plots of my books are. So this is about as far as I can go with it for now. But hopefully you get an idea, a good idea of what I'm doing in these plot notebooks. Now, another idea that I have seen people use before with some of these is to use your old planner. You could use them as a way to track your characters' movements. So for example, you know, if you're using a calendar here, it wouldn't really matter if it's July or not. You just use the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that you could jot down something here to follow your character's timeline. So you might be like, okay, Harper went to school on Monday and this is what happened to her. And then I specifically say 2 days later, this happened. So then I would write just a little note about what happened on Wednesday. Then it would be like the next day. Okay, so I know that's Thursday, and it would help you keep track of what's going on with your characters' timelines. And the dates don't really matter. It's just more the days of the week, so that you don't accidentally say it's Friday and she was getting out of school, and then the next day she's back in school again, because readers will be very confused. So you can keep up with your timelines through this. I also just went ahead and started looking at the Erin Condren to see if I could do it basically the same way. Since these have the same 3 boxes, it's very simple to organize it the same way that I did the Happy Planner. It's just, as you can see, the boxes are much smaller, so you would have to write much smaller. You also can't put new pages into this unless you were to like glue them on or stick them on in some way, because there's no coil, there's no obviously discs. But the cool thing about this would be that you could keep an entire series of plot notes, you know, together in this type of booklet. And all you would do is the same basic thing. You would cover up the dates at the top and then separate this bottom box, or you could use that bottom box however you want. There's also these lined boxes or sections down here at the bottom, which might be kind of cool for writing out the goal, motivation, and conflict for each of your characters. But you kind of get the idea. This would be basically the same type. Like, see how I did that down here with the goal, motivation, conflict. I was just kind of playing around with what I could do. But you could easily use this type of planner for the same sort of plotting thing. And this would be just kind of a pretty place to, you know, organize and brainstorm your plotting notebooks. But the reason that I like the Happy Planner system is because of the disc bound. You can take pages in and out, so you can use some of those old planner pages, you can use the discs and everything else, but it becomes more like a notebook that you can add your own plotting pages into and your own notes pages into, which I really, really like. And that is all I have for you today. I hope this has been something fun and interesting for you to see how I use my old Happy Planner to plot my books. I will also be having hopefully planner style videos on Saturdays every time. So next week I'm going to talk about how I use a color coding system in my plotting notes and how I use different color codes for different multiple POVs. So if there's any other type of planning or organizational style video you'd like to see, just let me know. During the main weeks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to be talking about like marketing and how I built my main series over the next few weeks. So I hope that you will subscribe to this channel, give this video a thumbs up, and comment below and let me know what you've enjoyed about these videos, and if possible, what types of videos you'd like to see in the future. All right, guys, I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.